Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Lehman from Math with Mrs. Lehman, and today I'm doing a video on how to do a box plot, or otherwise known as a box and whisker plot, and the steps of how to proceed when making one of these. So I have the data set as shown here. If you go ahead and keep an eye on the screen, I'll identify step one, which is to identify the minimum value. So when you're making a box plot, the first thing you need to know is what's your minimum value. In this case, it is 0, all right? The next thing that we're going to need to know as part of our 5-number summary to make a box plot is the median. So find the median. You can just, physically work your way to the middle of this data set, or another thing that you can do is you count the number of pieces of data. In this case we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 pieces of data. So what you do is you take that number of data, add 1 to it, that's 14, divided by 2, that's 7. So that means the median is in the 7th place over. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That means our median is 4. All right, our median is 4, so I'm going to write that down. And I would make a list every time. Minimum, median. The next one you would write is Q1 or quartile 1. So again, the abbreviation for quartile 1 is just Q1. So what that means is you're going to look just at this section right here. I'm going to get fancy and highlight that. All right, so I'm looking at these numbers, all right, and I want to find the median of those numbers. So again, you're going to count inward. So, okay, so we're between 1 and 2, right? So what do we do there? If you have 2 numbers, what you need to do is add them together. You get 3, obviously, and then you would divide that by 2. That's going to give you the midpoint between those numbers. So that would be 1.5. So our Q1 is 1.5. So I'm going to write that down, 1.5. And then we have to do the same thing for quartile 3. So again, now I'm looking at this section. I'll get fancy again and highlight. Right, so I'm looking at all of these numbers now. Again, you're going to count into the middle value, and I'm somewhere between 8 and 10, so the halfway point is 9. Again, to get that, if you didn't know, between 8 and 10 is 9. You would add those 2 numbers. So in this case, 8 plus 10 is 18, divided by 2 is 9. So that is what we call quartile 3. And Q3, you may see it called, and that value is 9. All right? So we have 4 of our 5-number summary done. The last thing that you would need to do is identify the maximum value, or our highest number, which right here is 12. All right? So these are the things that we would use to make a box plot. So to make a box plot, the next step is to pick your scale for your number line, and that's going to totally depend on what values you have in your data set. Our numbers range from 0 to 12. I could easily count by 1s. I'm going to pick counting by 2s for space sake here, so I'm just going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. And I'm going to make a little blueprint, essentially, for myself by plotting out the numbers that I'm about to highlight in light blue. All right? These numbers, these are the 5-number summary, or this is the 5-number summary that I'm going to use to construct my box plot. So 0 was our minimum value, so I'm going to put a dot above 0. 4 was our median. I'm going to put a dot there. Quartile 1 was 1.5, so 1 would be about here. I'm going to go right there for, oops, that was at a half. I'm going to go on the other side. I'm going to go right here for 1.5. Quartile 3 is at 9, and the maximum value is 12. So now we just have a bunch of dots on the paper. So what you do is you connect the minimum to Q1 with a line, all right? And you do the same thing from Q3 to the maximum. And then in the middle section here, you are going to draw that box, and then there's a line that goes through the median. Now, you don't typically write this on here, but I'm just going to write these values so that you can see where to place things. So your first spot is, is your minimum. That's your minimum. This is what we would call quartile 1. This is our median value, quartile 3, and this is our maximum. Now, each of these sections represent 25% of the data. So this little section that I'm going to highlight in blue here, that's 25%, right? This is another 25%. I should write percent over here, okay? And then the section in green, this represents 25% of the data, or as we said, it's called a quartile, right? So this is 25%. And then this one in blue as well, this is another 25%. So essentially what we're looking at when we make a box plot is 100% of our data, and we're seeing where it's distributed, okay? So there are some pros and cons to doing a box plot versus maybe a dot plot or a histogram. So we'll look at those right now. So the pros of a box plot is that you can look at the data really quickly and you can really read it quite simply. It's not very detailed as far as, you know, the data that you were working with. So that, as you can see over here, that lack of exact values can be a downfall if you're not looking for a quick gist or a quick summary. But, you know, it's a pro and kind of a con together. You can see the outliers easily with a box plot, and you can definitely see the symmetry or the shape of the data. So if you have a box plot, for example, that the data is really concentrated to the left, and this, you know, upper half of the data we'd say is really spread out, we would call that skewed right because it's more spread out on the right. And you can see that pretty easily with a box plot once you know how to interpret those. So again, that kind of goes with the skewedness of the data set. If you have tons of data to interpret and look at, a dot plot can be a little tedious. With a box plot, you're able to display a large amount of data relatively simply, right? So that's a real positive of this. And the variability, it's easy to see how stretched out each of those sections of data are. So that's kind of a positive. It's also nice to see what percentage of the data falls within certain ranges, because you can look and say, like going back to our previous example, whoops, I don't know what I did there. Close that out. All right. As we can see in this example here, we can look at this and say, you know, that right side is more spread out. So, you know, the data is more tightly grouped on the left, and the lower values tend to be more typical. So the variability is kind of easy to see there. The cons, the downfalls of a box and whisker plot is that the mean and the mode are not displayed. You can't look at this and know, you can't look at, there we go again. Why is that doing that? Goodbye. You can look at this and, you know, you can see the median, so that's good, but you're not going to identify what value was most common, or you're not going to know your average. That's harder to display. So I think that should help you out on your homework. If you have questions, you know, you can always save them for Monday when we'll go over this. Have a great day. Bye.